Rick, are you, I've got a message that the YouTube audio is not working. I don't know if that's because nobody's saying anything. Okay, so Rick has corrected that. I'm hoping that the YouTube audio is now working. We're still having large numbers of people joining, so I'm hoping we can wait just 1 or 2 minutes, but then we'll get started shortly after the time. It's 12. I make it 12:01 right now, so.
Nick, someone's saying that the guest chat isn't open.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's happening with that. I was hoping we had the guest chat. I'm wondering if Denise, can you?
Dan and April both guest chatted, and I can see it, so I'm not quite.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. Maybe they're talking about the YouTube chat. There's a YouTube chat. I'm not quite sure. Yeah, I'm seeing chat messages.
Me too.
Maybe the chat messages on the guest.
So it says a moderator can chat, but not a guest.
Let me see. So this might be. This might be a Kelly. Is this a limitation? Is Kelly Rourke? Are you there? Hang on, let me see if Kelly. Maybe I'll promote Kelly. Kelly's our expert on these large meetings. Let me see if I can find her in there.
I'm coming. Here I am.
And then we're just going to get started. Kelly, you just entered as Kelly. I don't know. I'm gonna.
It should be fixed now. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yep. Okay. Good. Okay. Good. I'm going to suggest that we still have large numbers of people entering. We're going to have to get started at some point because there's a large. Okay.
Let's go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I might say we go ahead. Okay, so let me just run through here. This is Alan's meeting. I'm going to turn over to him very quickly. I just wanted to run through the protocols. There's going to be 3 brief presentations by Alan, and then by Peter, and then by Bruce. And then everybody was given the opportunity to submit questions. We're going to read in some of the pre-submitted questions and have them addressed by various people. And then after that, we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. And to ask a question, to control bandwidth and control the chaos of everybody talking at once, you have to raise your hand, and you'll be recognized and promoted so you can speak. Okay? I'm going to turn it right over to Alan. Go ahead, Alan.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you to our faculty and staff who enabled our students to finish their spring semester and graduate on time. At that time, we successfully took care of more than 500 students who chose to remain on campus. Currently, there are more than 200 in our housing. This experience gives us some confidence in our abilities to look after our on-campus students during this pandemic. Our priority is, and always will be, focused on the success of our students. And even though our commencement was virtual for the first time, I think it was successful. We're in a time like no other in our history. We are experiencing the COVID-19 pandemic. We must reopen in August, and it is not likely that any new international graduate students will join our university in the fall. In addition, we must also understand our role in addressing the systemic racism so apparent in our society. We must embrace and support Black Lives Matter movement, and we must say clearly in one voice that Black Lives Matter. This means we must renew our commitment to substantially increase access for African American students to our university, as well as increasing the number of African American faculty and staff members and opening doors of opportunity for their advancement, as well as working to be an even better partner with our Bronzeville neighbours. In fact, planning and efforts are underway to address these important matters, sparked by significant conversations over the last several months with African American trustees, alumni, and our current students. I have met and will continue to meet with our students to better understand their needs. It is clear that our university must become more welcoming, must better understand how we can support student success, and must recognise that we have not done enough to make sure that our African American students feel supported and valued. I've heard very troubling concerns from our African American students, ranging from classroom interaction to a large disconnect between expectations and reality. I've received suggestions from change from our trustees and from our student body, and I will listen even more and communicate a detailed plan that is first discussed among our faculty and staff. As it is clear, a top-down solution will not be successful. We as a community must change. Certain facts are clear. We must increase the number of African American faculty in all of our schools and colleges. Our provost will lead this initiative. We must increase the number of African American students in our various campus sites and develop a culture that allows them to be successful, not only during their student years, but once they graduate. Mike Goss will lead the initiative to increase our African American student body, and our provost, our deans, and our student life professionals led by Katie Stetz will focus on developing an appropriate campus culture to allow and promote retention and graduation of these students. Our goal must be that all students have a similar experience that is inclusive, enriching, and enables them for success. We must increase the number of scholarships available in Bronzeville and in Chicago for students who graduate from high schools around us, and we must become a partner with these schools to enable future success. Ernie Eisenmenger and I, with our board, alumni, and friends, will work on developing increased scholarships. We must increase the number of African American faculty and staff leaders on our campus by developing a pathway program to develop such leaders. Peter Kilpatrick and Mike Horan will lead this effort. We must reinvigorate the development of our culture that supports all people, especially those who have been underrepresented on our campus, to allow for future success. Our deans, vice presidents, our faculty council, our staff council, and student leadership under the guidance in the provost and I will lead this effort. These are certain facts that are absolutely clear, but stating a desired outcome is not the same as achieving that outcome. And I'm asking the above groups to meet and formulate concrete plans that we will implement going forward. This is not a short-term problem and will need long-term solutions. We will become the university where difference is important. Diversity has been baked into our community's DNA for over a century, unlike other universities for which this is a relatively new undertaking. Our future as a university is changing significantly due to the pandemic, but also due to the fact that national policy will make it less appealing for international students to come to the United States. In the past, we as a strategy decided to become a global university, and we became very successful under the guidance of Darsh Roussan. However, it is doubtful if this strategy will be successful in the future. We have been growing as an undergraduate university to mitigate decreasing international enrollment. The discussion of elimination of OPT, reduction in H-1B visas, and increasing difficulty in becoming a citizen has led to a decreasing trend in student numbers over the past few years. And as numbers decrease, we have seen much greater competition, not only within the US, but in other countries. The pandemic has accelerated these issues, and now we are predicting no new international students in the fall semester, and perhaps even in the spring semester. This became clear only at the end of May. At our board meeting, I discussed this with our board members, and we were required to present a worst-case financial scenario, which we shared with you on June 2nd, as that now seems to be realistic. Peter and Mike Horan will discuss this in detail, but we face a very tough year going forward, but it is a year we will overcome. Our strategy has been to maintain our full-time faculty and staff and attempt to ensure that their take-home pay does not decrease and their jobs continue. Thus the steps taken in the June 2nd memo. The Provost will discuss these steps that were taken to balance our income with our expenditures. There have been questions such as, will administrators face the same cuts as faculty and staff? And the answer is, of course. There is no salary increase. If there are no salary increases and benefit reductions, there are no salary increases and benefit reductions for everyone. Everything will be the same for everyone. Let me talk about bonuses. First of all, until the faculty and staff receive a salary increase and resumption of full retirement benefits, I will not receive the part of my salary that is based on board requirements negotiated each year. My salary is set up so that if I make the criteria that the board requires, I receive my full salary, a salary that is comparable to the average of other university presidents. Thus, my salary is an incentive-based salary that I must achieve. It is not a conventional bonus system. If I do not achieve certain goals, my salary can decrease each year by up to 30%. Thus, this year, my salary will decrease by 25% compared to last year. By the way, I do not set my salary, the board does, and all increases of administrators are approved by the board, and the salary pool percentage for administrators is set at the salary average approved in our budget each year. Therefore, it is the same for faculty, staff, and for administrators. There are, however, some people who are hired who have deferred salary, which they receive if they stay a certain amount of time. This is a very common practice when hiring from outside the university. This also turns up as a bonus in IRS filings, but this is not a traditional bonus either, but a promise that the university must honour. Lastly, we must reopen in the fall. Without students on our campus and in our housing, we're not financially viable. No traditional university is. Thus, we must reopen in the fall with an on-campus experience. It is also what our students want and expect. Bruce Watts will describe the reopening procedures to enable the potential for operation of our various campus sites in the fall. I have reviewed all of the questions that were posted online before the meeting and tried to answer some of the very general comments during this time. After presentations by Peter Kilpatrick and Bruce Watts, Nick Menhart will moderate a session to answer a number of online questions, and if there are time, he will open up for live questions. After the town hall, we will post answers to questions that could not be answered live. I now turn the virtual podium over to Peter Kilpatrick. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Alan. Nick, if you could pull up the first of the 3 slides that I have for my portion of the presentation, and then the next slide. So Alan asked me if I would share the rationale behind our financial plan for next year. And I've broken it down into essentially 6 points that I share on this slide and the next slide. So the first point is the point that Alan made a few minutes ago. Given the international student visa situation and our estimate that no new international students will enroll in academic year 21, we're projecting a $30 million revenue shortfall for this coming fiscal year. Now, this was completely out of our hands, and we only became aware of the reality of this visa situation, as Alan said, in late May, when we presented it to the Board of Trustees at our May 25th meeting. Up until May 25th, we really believed that the consulates might open. And in fact, there have been some consulates open in China only to close again. And there have been some consulates that said they would open in India, but we have yet to see students get new visa interviews at either one of those countries' consulates. So we're operating under the assumption, point number 2, that the most important asset that we have to preserve in this extraordinary financial year is our full-time faculty and staff. And because of that, we've looked for cuts with part-time faculty, with part-time staff, with overtime, and with student workers, as well as with our operating budget. The third point I should make is that we're absolutely required by our creditors to balance our budget each year. So one of the questions that was asked was, are you willing to admit now, because you're having this tough year, that maybe we're not in as strong a position as we've claimed? But in actuality, our financial position vis-a-vis our balance sheet, which is our assets and our liabilities, has never been stronger. We just came off the best fundraising year we've ever had. But we can't run a budget deficit. Unlike the federal government, we have to balance our budget every year. And the way we do that is we either increase our revenue or we decrease our expenses. So next slide. We also know we cannot use critical facilities maintenance or extramurally funded research dollars to balance the budget. We have an annual budget of roughly $50 million in extramurally funded research, and we have an annual budget of roughly $20 million in critical facilities maintenance. And these are things that just have to be done or our facilities would begin to break down, and we can't rob from our researchers those dollars to pay for our budget shortfall. So point number 5, this brings us to the following 4 categories from which we can balance the budget: part-time staff and faculty, student workers that are not federally funded or on grants and contracts, operating expenses, and retirement benefits. Those 4 categories, point number 6, total approximately $70 million. Thus, we need to cut approximately 40% of this $70 million in order to achieve a revenue shortfall of roughly $30 million. So if you want to know, will we have part-time staff and faculty, the answer is we will have some adjuncts next year, but we will have to cut significantly to get 40% of the cuts out of the adjuncts. Will we have student workers that are not federally funded? We'll have some small number for critical expenditures, essential expenditures. Will we have operating expenses? We will have operating expenses for very essential purchases to deliver our education and to keep the university running. And from our June 2nd memo what our plans are vis-a-vis all of these, as well as the retirement benefits. So at this point, I think I'd like to call on Mike Horan to add any additional commentary to what I just shared with you about how we manage to balance the budget, or how we plan to balance the budget. Mike?
On the list to be sitting here giving this presentation today. But also not on the list was the fact that I was going to have a tremendous multifaceted team of over 50 people from across the university to work with us in facing a challenge that none of us have ever faced before. And face it, we did. I was grateful to be able to work with everyone who's supported this initiative so far. So Nick, I'm going to pull this up. Great. So before I go further, I'd like to thank Marty Schaum and Denise Moriarty, who prepared the graphics and the PowerPoint for this presentation I'm giving today. I couldn't have done it without you, Marty and Denise. Thank you so much for that. What we're facing is what other universities like us are facing. And we've been staying in touch with other universities as we develop our plan to share thoughts and ideas on how to reopen in a way that minimizes risk. We've also been working with state and city government, the state of Illinois, the city of Chicago, as they prepare their guidance for not only their city and state as a whole, but they're both providing guidance specific to higher education. They've released their phase 3 guidance, which is the phase we're in right now, but we've made it clear to them that it's critical that universities have guidance for phase 4 well in advance, because we have to plan for things like class registration. So we've been monitoring the development of their guidance, even though phase 4 has not been released yet. and we've based our plan for phase 4 on what we believe is going to be in the state and city plans when they come out. Well, we're prepared to update our plan as we receive revised guidance from the state and from the city, and also as we see a need to revise it due to our own needs and criteria here on campus. Reopening, in the sense of this presentation, means gradually coming back towards full and normal on-campus operations, and that will be in stages. But it's important to point out that the university has never closed. We have always remained open, and that's thanks, first of all, to our faculty who adapted quickly to complete the spring semester online. It's thanks to our staff who have continued to work remotely and on campus. And it's thanks, last but not least, to our essential workers who have been on here on campus throughout, keeping things running. In fact, we've had up to 700 people on campus at peak since the beginning of the COVID lockdown. And we've been able to do that without an apparent outbreak of the virus on campus. How is that possible? I think a key, which we'll reiterate several times in this presentation, is adhering to the public health protocols, which are well publicized by the Center for Disease Control, and we'll be reinforcing that with graphics and other messages here on campus and on our website and through electronic communications. And last but not least, before I go on, when I say campus in the context of this presentation, that means all campuses. This is a plan for the entire university. And we may see individual campuses develop a subordinate plan to the university plan, which addresses some specific items tailored to their needs and their unique circumstances. And those will be publicized within those individual campuses. But this is the general plan for the entire university. We followed a very integrated interdepartmental approach involving, as I said, over 50 people from across the university. We've used a matrix type approach where we organize to focus first on specific space types, and I'll go into all of those later. And then cutting across all of those space types, different functional areas, whether it be spacing or separation or cleaning or traffic control. Again, we'll cover all of those later in the presentation. The entire team of 50 people has met as a large group every week on Tuesday mornings. I've never seen that many participants in a regular working meeting. And we have a very high turnout, very high percentage of participation, very energized, high interest, and a lot of creativity coming out of that group. There have been breakout meetings of those individual focus areas that you see in the first bullet. And those teams are meeting up to daily in order to plan specific functions within their area. So tremendous effort from the whole team. First, just a quick review. You know, if you've read our plan, we refer to things in stages. We've moved out of the lockdown, which equates to the city and state phases 1 and 2, stay-at-home order. That's when we were operating remotely, teaching classes online, and on campus only for essential services. Phase 3 is the phase that we're in now. That's the city and state recovery phase. We're calling that reopening stage A. Phase 4 is the revitalization phase for the city and state. We call that reopening stage B. And the reason we use different terms is because we don't want to get confused with the city and state phases, because while our guidelines will correspond to the relevant phase, our timing may be a little bit different, and I'll go into that in a later slide. Phase 5, of course, is where we'd all like to be eventually, is the fully restored return to normalcy, and that is our reopening stage C. In reopening stage A, where we are now, it's currently in effect. We anticipate that will stay in effect, as has been said in one of Alan's communications, until August 1st, because we can keep a lower campus density before the fall semester really resumes. Essential workers continue during stage A, and some additional employees will return to campus, and those we're calling preliminary reopening personnel. That, in stage A, primarily relates to research labs. And there's a process set up, you'll find it in the plan, through Fred Hickernell in our Office of Research, where a Google form can be filled out for permission to enter for researchers or their PhD students and assistants. No gatherings of over 10 people during stage A, and public health protocols remain in place as they will for quite some time. More details on those later because they're the most important thing. Classes during the summer are continuing online. Stage B will correspond to the city and state phase 4 in terms of the guidelines and types of actions that we'll be taking, but the timing may be a little bit different. If the city and state were to go into phase 4 even next week, we will not go into stage B until Alan declares we're in stage B. And again, there may be no reason to rush into stage B. We will bring people back to campus on a staged basis leading up to August 1st in preparation for fall classes. During stage B, though, once we're there, classes will resume on campus and in a hybrid model. Classes will be socially distanced, and as we're understanding state and city guidance, which is emerging, be capped to a percentage of normal room occupancy. Right now we're hearing that's about 50%. We haven't heard a cap expressed in terms of number of people, but again, we're monitoring and will update as that guidance becomes available. Again, more employees will begin to return to campus. These will be a much broader cross-section, cutting across the entire university. The current expectation is no gatherings on campus will be allowed over 50 people. But the class size limit, while we're anticipating and planning for 50, that may change and it may be separate depending on the city and state guidance. Public health protocols, again, will remain in place. Stage C, I won't spend much time on this slide. This will be a happy day. It starts when the city and state enter phase 5, and it is the return to normalcy. It is our full resumption of normal operations. However, as we learn lessons during this experience, some safety precautions may continue. I think we're all going to learn good habits through the COVID-19 experience that we continue. I was in a campus restroom on another part of campus just this morning and noticed a flyer on the wall, which has probably been there for years, and it was precautions to follow during flu season. And lo and behold, they looked a lot like what we're saying about COVID-19. So that guidance is not new, and it just goes to show you that the flu was nothing to take lightly either. So even when we're past COVID-19, we still need to practice good public health protocol habits because of flu and other contagious diseases. This is the most important slide in the presentation. If we were to print something and hand it out, if you were all attending in person, this would be the slide. These are the public health protocols which are reinforced on the CDC website, the state website, the city website, and on ours. Social distancing is the first. That is basically staying 6 feet apart wherever feasible. It is minimizing crowds in proportion to the space with which a group is gathered. Face coverings is number 2. We say face coverings because that could be bandanas or things like that. The most common, of course, are masks. And we will have a face covering requirement on campus, as you've seen in the plan, in public areas and in certain other areas, including classrooms. Hygiene, hand washing, we're emphasizing as the most effective means. We'll be keeping all of our restrooms well supplied with soap, and the water supply will be continuous. Sanitizer stations will also be increased across campus so that we'll have much more opportunity to use those. However, I would stress that hand washing is the most effective method. And then last but not least, self-monitoring of symptoms is something we should all be doing, and we should not be coming to campus if we experience symptoms or if we've received a positive test for COVID-19. Now I'll talk a little bit more about our integrated planning approach. Again, we follow the matrix approach, crossing space types on the horizontal with functional areas on the vertical. We had a variety of space types and leaders for each of those. I'll turn to that in my notes and just demonstrate a few of the people who are working on those. The leaders in the classroom and teaching labs, Abby McGrath, Nick Menhart, and Dawn Rupsich represented the Convisor Law Center, and a variety of people on that team supporting them. The research labs, Fred Hickernell, Josh Hignite from the Office of Research, and Bob Brackett and Dina Awad from the Moffitt campus, IFISH. The offices planning everything we need to consider when we reopen in an office environment. That's led by Hillary Hudson-Hosick and Shadi Baitis, who is of course, the chair of our Staff Advisory Council, is also a member of that team, as well as a number of other individuals. Shadi's also a valuable contributor, not only because of his SAC role, but because his OTS role makes him familiar with pretty much every type of office we have here on campus. Housing is, of course, Katie Murphy-Stetz. Kevin Gallagher is working with Katie on that. Athletics, Yusha Gilmore and Mark Caldwell. Common use buildings, these are buildings that a wide variety of people, including visitors, use. Lance Pressel from the Kaplan Institute, Devin Savage from Galvin Library, Jeanette Masura representing Herman Hall, and also familiar with MTCC because of the events that we run there. Common building elements, these are lobbies, restrooms, elevators, stairwells, corridors, things that are common to every building, and features that we need to keep in mind as we plan for people to return to campus. Josh Siegel is leading that. Josh is our property manager for the South Campus and also our chief of administration for the facilities group, so very familiar with the campus as a whole and the entire team that supports him there. And then last but not least, this is a group that produced a lot more than I ever thought they would, was outdoor space. I was thinking, what outdoor space do we need to worry about? People touching things or people crowding through gates or things like that. But this group has really come up with a lot of positive ways to leverage the outdoors and use it for positive benefit. Leading that group is Kevin Gallagher, and supporting him, Ron Henderson from the College of Architecture, Dana Royal, also with the Staff Advisory Council, but representing ACAPS, and Yusha Gilmore from Athletics, as well as a number of others who are planning creative ways to use the outdoors to our benefit as we reopen. The functional areas, and there's a separate slide for each of these, so I'll go into the actual technical description of what these groups are doing. But the separation functional area, this is keeping people 6 feet apart. It might be using barriers where you can't keep people 6 feet apart. That's led by Colette Porter and Jill DeRue. Scheduling, that means class scheduling, but it also means work scheduling as we look at strategies such as staggered start and stop times to the workday to help ease congestion not only in our lobbies and our parking areas, but also on public transportation. Cleaning and hygiene is Kevin Gallagher from facilities, leading that group, as is the case with building systems. Technology, Ophir Tregalo and Eric Breeze. Signage and graphics, Colette Porter and Denise Moriarty. personal protective equipment. Cindy Chafee, our head of environmental health and safety, and Julia Arnott Burns, who is our emergency management specialist. And last but not least, screening and testing is a functional area led by Gary Wally of the Student Health and Wellness Center. Okay, a little bit about separation. So separation is basically involving strategies to minimize close contact. This is going to be produced through classroom layouts, which represent social distancing for each space and determines the capacity. Support there is being provided by Colette and Jill from our planning department and by Dirk Dennison and Mark Osorio from the College of Architecture, supporting Abby and Nick and Dawn in leading the classrooms group primarily. The guidance, again, is currently capped at 50 students per class and 50% of occupancy, but that could change. Guidance changes. We also are repurposing large event spaces. So the Herman Hall Ballroom and the MTCC Ballroom are just two of many examples. Those will be repurposed for teaching in the fall semester in order to maximize our ability to provide more classes on campus with social distancing in place. We will have at certain reception areas and points of service, say the tower desk or the cash registers on campus, clear plastic barriers to provide some additional safety protection. We're also going to be encouraging directional flow through entrances, through hallways, with some defined traffic flow in those areas using graphics and signage. The elevator capacity. We got several questions on elevators. Right now, we are planning on an elevator occupancy limit of 4 individuals, but that may change as guidance changes. This is stricter than at some universities and at some commercial buildings. We need to keep in mind, although that doesn't allow a strict 6-foot separation, we are going to be requiring masks in all public areas and common areas, which includes elevators. There's also a time element, which you'll see on the CDC website when it comes to close contact. The highest risk is extended close contact, and a quick elevator ride or passing someone in the corridor is not the same risk as extended close contact. We also are planning to have a lobby manager in the tower lobby during peak rush times to help manage traffic flow, to help manage the elevator operations, and perhaps even move people around the corner so that we can use the freight elevator as an extra elevator to help people get up and down. At the Convisor Law Center, that may be a strategy that we employ if it's deemed necessary, although the schedule and demand at Convisor and the floors and elevator use are considerably different than what we have here in the tower, from what we have here in the tower. So we haven't made that decision yet, but in the tower, we'll definitely have some additional concierge service when you do arrive for work or when you're leaving. Also, we're going to have visual cues to help support all of this, and we'll get into that a little bit later when we talk about graphics and signage. Next, I talked a little bit about scheduling. We will be tying our class scheduling, obviously, to a modified layout and a modified mix of classrooms and spaces. We also may be modifying our work schedules, primarily staggered start and stop times, and perhaps staggered lunch times, because that will help not only reduce elevator congestion, but it'll also help to reduce the traffic flow through doors and town corridors. We have extended the class change time to 20 minutes. That's the current intent, to give a little bit more time to spread out the pedestrian flow during class change times, and also to provide some additional flexibility in class scheduling. I mentioned staggered work schedules. We also may still employ during stage B, or phase 4, some blend of on-campus and remote work, although we are returning substantially more to on-campus work than where we are now. Cleaning and hygiene. This is a topic that I know is important to everyone. Our custodial focus is and will remain on disinfecting type of cleaning in high traffic, high touch areas using approved disinfecting solutions. Right now, we get a lot of questions about classrooms. We plan on daily cleaning of classrooms with disinfecting solutions by our custodial staff, and also plan on providing supplies should students or faculty wish to wipe down their chairs or desks on a more frequent basis. And this is in keeping with guidance that we're seeing coming out from government agencies and the CDC. We're going to follow a similar approach in offices, although the frequency will be different, but there will be some periodic cleaning of offices using disinfecting solutions by our custodial staff. They'll also be doing standard cleaning, of course, not just disinfecting cleaning. And then supplies made available should office users want to clean their workstations or desks or kitchen areas closer to that interval where the custodial staff is coming in. The number of sanitizer stations, as I mentioned, will be increased. We plan on having one on every floor of every academic building and having different types of sanitizer supplies, if not the sanitizing towers in lobbies of specific areas, specific office areas. Again, our emphasis is on hand washing, and our custodial staff will be focused on making sure we take care of the basics there, like having soap in the dispensers when people need it. We will be making sure that we have paper towels in all restrooms. If that sounds unusual to you, we do have some restrooms that have only air dryers. So we will be taking those out of service and providing paper towels in those rooms and in all restrooms. This is for two reasons. There's been some suspicion that air-blown hand dryers may spread germs. So as an extra precaution, we are disconnecting them, at least for the time being. And also paper towels can be used to open the doors when you're leaving the restroom, which is a public health protocol that we encourage. And finally, we're increasing our cleaning supplies system. They're plugging air gaps where air may be going through a crack beside a duct rather than into the duct, doing a lot of that sort of PM work while population on campus is lower and they're able to get in and do that easier. Also, they'll be increasing the outside air supply to the extent that's feasible and flushing and operating all of the water systems on campus. Some of you may have read concerns about things like Legionnaire's disease if toilets have not been flushed for months and then people come back to work. They're going around exercising all of the restroom fixtures across campus during the summer to make sure that we have water regularly flowing through them. In the elevators, another precaution we're taking for our elevator rides in the tower and at the Convisor Law Center is we're installing a UV air purifying filter in those elevators to help kill germs before they enter the elevator. We're also checking and servicing all of our building entrances and exits because we want all of them operating so that we can spread out people as they're entering and leaving the building and they're not all using one just to get in and get out. Also, our electric door openers for our ADA purposes, we're making sure are all operating. I mentioned paper towels in lieu of air dryers. Water fountains, as a precaution, standard water fountains for drinking will be placed out of service, although we're finalizing the guidance on this. It sounds as though the city and state are allowing automatic bottle filling stations to be operated. Again, that's pending city and state guidance. Technology is an area that's been capably led by Ophir and Eric. They provided some input for this slide. which I'll run through. And their efforts are focusing on three areas. First of all, for preparing our classrooms for online offerings. Select classrooms on the Meese campus and Convisor Law Center will provide capabilities for simultaneous in-person, synchronous online, and traditional lecture capture, recording those classes. We're calling these hybrid rooms. There will also be select academic lab and studio spaces, which will have additional technology to allow basic live streaming and recording via a laptop or other PC. Thermal monitoring stations have been purchased. We've installed 2 here on the main campus, 1 at Convisor Law Center and 1 at the Moffett campus. These can allow an individual to hold out their risk and self-monitor their temperature. It's private, it's not reported, it's voluntary, but it's encouraged. The remote work study tools refer to an expanded capacity for VPN, virtual access to software titles via a new virtual computer lab, and continued use of Google Meet, Blackboard Collaborate, the new VoIP telephone system, and mobile application. Waiting for the slide to turn here. All right, signage and graphics. We'll be placing signage and graphics on both vertical and horizontal surfaces across our campuses. And they'll focus on these areas that you see here, reinforcing the public health protocols, reinforcing social distancing, and also giving some visual cues for social distancing, like staggered tape of where to stand, where queues are likely to develop. Elevator occupancy signs will notify individuals so that 5th person doesn't step onto the elevator. Hand washing reminders, sanitizing station instructions, and traffic flow indicators. These signs were all conceptualized by facilities and environmental health and safety and others, and produced in-house, designed by our marketing and communications department, and printed by our Canon Office Services. Personal protective equipment include face coverings, as I mentioned before. The university will have a supply of masks and other personal protective equipment. Most of our masks will be reusable face coverings. We do have some surgical and N95 masks, but the surgical masks are primarily being used in locations where we expect a lot of visitors may show up without a mask, or a need for a disposable mask versus reusable mask. But for issuance to, for example, students when they return back to campus, or if any staff or faculty would like a mask when they return to campus, for their day-to-day use, most of our stock is reusable masks. N95 masks are for an activity that justifies the use of an N95 mask, especially now when they're in such short supply. They're primarily for activities such as healthcare, such as certain lab or industrial use, which we do have on campus, but again, we're not handing them out to everyone. We'll be making personal protective equipment, including gloves, eye protection, face shields, etc., which we are centrally purchasing in coordination with our lab leaders. We'll be making those available through a new PPE store. These supplies can be ordered through the Hawkworks app, which is our facilities management app. You'll find a link to that on the portal. And notification will be provided once your order is ready to be picked up. And there is actually going to be a physical store location in Herman Hall, although that's not going to be the only way to obtain these materials. As far as budget for these, if the need is due to COVID, there's a central funding line for that. If it's something that would be needed steady state, even beyond COVID for normal operations, that'll be departmentally funded, but centrally purchased in order to achieve buying power. And Snow Rutkowski in our purchasing department has done a great job there supporting our purchasing of PPE. Screening and testing. This is an area that Gary Wally is leading, working hand in hand with Katie Stetz. Self-monitoring also, again, is our first line of defense. Do not come to campus if you have symptoms or have been exposed or have tested positive. Screening and testing will be used. The details for that are in development, have not been finalized, but they will be issued when they are final. And temperature monitoring stations, as I mentioned, are available for voluntary use. If there's an increase in temperature monitoring that we develop, we will use additional tools in order to facilitate that. Communication will be through the university webpage primarily. There is a COVID-19 landing page. There's also a fall 2020 reopening page. And that fall 2020 page can be accessed directly, or it can be accessed via a link from the university's COVID-19 webpage. The reopening plan, which is a PDF, is available on the portal. There was an email sent out on that last week. That will be updated periodically. So if you happen to take a screenshot or download that, remember to go back and check periodically, because we may be updating it. We'll definitely be updating it at least once or twice before we get to phase 4. Finally, there will continue to be targeted emails on specific subjects that are a part of this plan, which will be issued by email or Illinois Tech Today posts on those subjects. For more information, you can refer to the CDC website. I would highly recommend that for the latest guidance on the trends of the virus. Also for latest updates on public health protocols, because that's the root source that informs all of our protocol information in our plan. Again, the iit.edu fall 2020 website, the COVID-19 website. I would also recommend the CTA and the Metro websites. We've gotten a lot of questions through the Blackboard regarding public transportation. At this time, we do not plan to prohibit the use of public transportation. The CTA and Metro both have comprehensive plans to address reopening in a COVID-19 environment, and those are expressed in detail on their respective websites. We are considering a staggered start and a staggered stop to ease congestion, not only on campus, but in public transportation. We do not plan, and I couldn't tell if one of the questions was implying this, a shortened workday because of longer commutes. We will be adjusting a staggering start and stop times so that people can arrive and depart at different times to ease congestion. There will also, as I said, be some blend of on-site and remote work. Still, we won't be 100% on-site when we begin phase 4, and that should also help to ease congestion on public transportation. This is one of 2 slides because I couldn't fit everybody on one slide. This is a list of those 50+ people that I mentioned that have been on the reopening planning committee, that are still on the reopening planning committee because we aren't going anywhere, or have contributed to the plan and to our plans for reopening in other ways. Page 2, as you can see, we filled almost 2 full pages. It's been very exciting to work with this team, very high energy, very talented and creative. And last but not least, I can't sign off without giving a big shout out to the people who have been here on campus throughout, our essential workers who are keeping the campus maintained, keeping our students fed, and keeping everything else operating here on campus. That's my presentation. Thank you very much.
All right. So now we have, I believe, some questions. Shall I read in the questions, I suppose? I'm going to go ahead with So a bunch of questions were submitted by email, and the administration and the reopening groups have selected and sort of unified them into common groups, and we're going to go through them. And we'll start on the financial side of things. And I guess the first question is that given the growing list of financial restrictions imposed by the administration, does this mean that you're now willing to admit the university is not in great financial shape? I think Peter touched on that. I don't know if you want to say a few more words.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important for everyone on the call, all the faculty, all the staff, to understand the difference between our balance sheet, which is our reckoning of assets and liabilities, versus our operating budget. So, you know, with regards to our balance sheet, we're in great shape. The university's never been in this good a shape, at least in my understanding, the last 30, 40 years of the university. But just because we have a great balance sheet, just because we have a lot of discretionary cash and we have, we're growing the endowment and we had a great fundraising year, doesn't mean we don't have to balance our budget. So our debt covenants, that is the promises that we made to the creditors who gave us the loans that we have, require that we balance the budget every year. Mike, do you want to chime in? Mike Horan?
Yeah, I agree with what Peter said. We are in the best financial shape, and just how we got there. I mean, in the past, over the past 3 years, we've paid off almost $38 million in debt. And we've generated enough unrestricted or maybe board restricted operating cash flow that we could tap. We'll finish off this year at about 80 million in unrestricted cash. So what has all that done for us? Well, it allowed us to go out into the bond market in December and refinance, $140 million in debt at an interest rate of 3.5%. Which was the lowest that Wells Fargo had seen. And the reason why we got $1 billion in offers for that $140 million in debt. And we were able to negotiate down our interest rate to that point to the 3.5%. Given where we were at, those investors, those smart investors who do this every day, believed in our story. So all the work we had put in, all the work we did with Huron, all the restructuring, everything that we did, helped pull that story together, the strategic plan, all of that. Over the last 3 years, we have been able to increase our operating cash flow. That's the cash that's left over, that we have left over after we've paid all of our expenses, not including capital and debt, but operating cash flow. We've been able to increase that every year. We've done everything that we've said we were going to do. Our rating agency gave us an upgrade for it. And a rating agency upgrade is like, your credit score going from good to really good. And then you go in for an auto loan and all of a sudden you find out instead of a 5% loan, you get a 3.5% loan. That's what's happened to us. So when we were ready to have our best year ever, and then COVID hits. But based on our reputation and what we've done over the past as a group over the past few years, we were able to go out into the markets and my biggest worry at this time was liquidity. I want to make sure that we have enough access to cash that we can get to fast just in case. In the summer months, we're always in we burn more cash than we bring in. So we're always in this cash burn cycle. So I wanted to make sure we had enough liquidity to get through the summer and be ready for the fall. And we went to Wintrust and were able to borrow $25 million in a line of credit at 1.35% interest. We would not have been able to do that had we not been in a stronger place. Had we not been a year ago or 2 years ago, we wouldn't have been able to do that deal. So, it's going to be a tough year. As Peter said, we've got to meet our debt covenants. with the people that we borrowed from, with the people that believed in our story. We have to come through and show them that we can deliver on that, no matter what kind of things we're going through, we'll deliver. And I think we put a plan in place that will allow us to do that, and will help us come through it. It's a tough year, but I think we'll come through it, and we'll come through it stronger, and live up to all those expectations, and keep our balance sheet strong.
We
So I hope that
have,
answers.
Great, thanks, Mike.
so we have one more sort of financial question, or a couple more financial questions, and the first one really touches on that Huron group, and it's when Huron was on campus, we devoted a lot of time and money to developing this plan. Is that steering committee still working?
That committee is not still working. We completed just about everything that Huron had recommended for us, and actually have been able to gain from that to meet that cash flow increase I was talking about before. There's a couple things that are still outstanding. The biggest one is maybe the consolidation of IT into one group. That was their big recommendation, but we always said we weren't going to take on anything until we were ready to, until we could do it better than the way it was being done before. And we're still working on that process. We didn't want to take on too much. You take on too much, you're going to fail. But as far as that group meeting, we've agreed to meet with the University Finance Committee, the Faculty Committee, Finance Committee, every 2 weeks to keep them informed. I will be giving a fall and spring update, financial update. So we will try to keep the community in touch with where we are financially on a regular basis. And for anybody who has questions, and I've been getting a lot of questions about our finances, just email me, and I'm happy to respond to any of those questions. And if there's something, Adrian's setting up an FAQ page on all of the stuff that we're doing. Actually, we're getting together too, and we're going to meet with all the finance managers and put together a training to talk about the memo I sent out last week on critical spending, just to make sure we're all on the same page. So anyway, that's where all that's at. We pretty much finished everything Huron said. There are a couple items outstanding, and we're still working on those.
All right. Okay. In an effort to save time, in an effort to save costs, some positions have been offered the opportunity to join other teams who are short on staffing. Is there a possibility that short-staffed teams will be able to post internal permanent positions to hire furloughed individuals? If you want Hillary to answer that.
Yeah, I'll let Hillary answer.
Yeah, hi, can you all, hopefully you can all hear me. You know, we assess our staffing needs on an ongoing basis. And, you know, this is a time when obviously we need all of our departments to be as efficient and effective as possible. And we really need to minimize hiring as much as we can. If, however, a new position were to be approved for hire, any of our employees, furloughed or not, would be welcome to apply.
Okay. Great. We have a question here on the school calendar, and I guess it has IIT considered starting earlier and finishing earlier as some universities are in anticipation of a fall wave.
Yeah, we actually have considered starting earlier, and we've considered ending earlier. We've neglected to do that, as most universities have, because we think the fall is still sufficiently uncertain in terms of where we're going to be in the progression of the pandemic. But if we're in a position where there's another outbreak late in the fall, you know, we're fully prepared to take action, including sheltering in place and going online. So we've given a lot of thought to this.
Okay. Okay, so now we have some cases. We have some questions that are sort of in the general area on COVID-19 cases and testing and response. we might ask Katie Stetz to share her thoughts on the testing. Is Katie, yeah, okay. And the first question, I guess, really is, could you provide some details about how the university will handle identified cases, and how will impacted members be notified, and potential closures of parts of the campus be handled?
Sure. So first of all, I just wanted to start by saying we have been dealing with infectious diseases for way longer than COVID. So we've had other I shouldn't say outbreaks, but we have had other situations where we work closely with students with tuberculosis and measles, and we do training on these types of things all the time. So we are prepared internally for sure to have to work these things out, and we've been doing it since for this situation since March. For sure, we have rooms where students can be isolated and be quarantined. We have food delivery set up for those students if they are isolated or quarantined on campus. We are preparing to have point of care tests available in the fall when things get started, not mandated, but available to our students through the Health and Wellness Center. And we also have other we also have the temperature gauges, the thermal monitoring systems that will be around campus for people to kind of self-identify or check themselves and follow suit appropriately, seeking medical attention appropriately, whether students go to health and wellness, faculty and staff would seek professional care through their providers. And so we've had over 500 students on campus between March and May. And let's see, with the cooperation of everybody, have been able to keep everybody safe. And I shouldn't say safe, but everybody has been managing themselves appropriately, as with all of the expectations with the social distancing, masks, hand washing, staying put if you're sick. And so let's see, the testing question and contact tracing, we will work with the student or the faculty staff member and city and state personnel to help with the contact tracing. Anybody internally at Illinois Tech, what we have done.
We're exploring the possibility of low-cost testing that could be offered by DPI, the Discovery Partners Institute, and others. We're looking into that. So we'd like to be in a position where anyone who wants to get tested, we can actually do that on campus. I don't know if we'll be there in the fall, but that's what we're looking into. We do know that the state and city will provide free testing for anyone that wants it. So we're going to be encouraging everyone to get tested before they come back to campus. I know Marty Mallon just submitted a question through the chat utility that the EEOC is saying that employers can require testing of all employees. I just know that's hard to administer with 7,000 people and 5,000 students, but we will certainly do that if it's feasible. But we're going to highly encourage people to do it, and we think we'll have a high percentage of people take us up on that. With regards to retesting, if they leave campus, our students will be in the city of Chicago. They'll be visiting people in the Chicagoland area. And we think that, their exposure may be just as great doing that as going out of state or downstate. So we're not sure we see a reason to require retesting every time they leave campus and come back, unless they're symptomatic. Okay, we can move on to work accommodations, so the general category there. I think we're looking to have perhaps Anthony D'Amato give a sort of general opening statement on work accommodations. And then I guess the first question is, what kind of flexibility will faculty and staff who are able to complete all of their duties remotely have in terms of coming into the office?
Well, can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to say hello to everybody. This is certainly not the way I wanted to see people. I hope everybody has been managing through this. There is no playbook for shutting down an entire economy due to a pandemic and then bringing it back. The states and the cities and the CDC keep providing us guidance. They have updated that guidance over time. Going back from March to now, we have seen a lot of changes in that guidance. If you remember back in March, we were all very concerned about surfaces, and the CDC has come out and really indicated that they think the virus is actually much more difficult to spread by a surface than they did in March. Back in March, the CDC was not advocating the use of masks, and they've really moved on that position. So what I want everybody to know is that there is a large group of people at the university who have been monitoring all the guidance that the city and the state and CDC have been putting out. We've also been we began last week, and this will probably be about a 3-week effort, really trying to gather all of our own internal data about all the various work spaces and work functions that we have. It's a big difference between an office that may have 20 cubicles and a large office suite that may have 3 separate offices with 3 people working in it. So the university's plan is to try to develop a working return that is flexible, reflects current guidance, and reflects the actual needs of the space in which people are working and the duties they're performing. So as we do that, we will take into consideration what is best, as Bruce indicated, to manage the density on the campus. So that may mean staggered terms or start times and end times, as Bruce suggested. There may be positions that we think it makes sense for people to work at home for at least a little while longer or on occasion. We will be looking at what PPE can provide us. Does it make, who needs plexiglass barriers, and does that provide a real good means of control? So as we move along and get closer to the August 1st date, we will come out with more concrete recommendations and plans, but we really want to do that based on very particular data that we're in the process of gathering, which will include a survey of staff to see how people get to campus, how people feel about having lunch, how people feel about kitchens. We want to really come up with a plan that, to the best we can do, addresses our actual situation and the actual work environment that people are in. So we will be considering a variety of options in order to figure out what is going to work best for us. But that is going to take a little bit of time, and that, much like Peter and Bruce said, can be subject to change. We will change the plan if the public health guidance suggests that it should be changed.
Okay, we have a sort of a similar question, but perhaps very more specific. I'm actually going to combine 2 questions here, or ask them both at the same time. Will faculty members who are immunocompromised or otherwise vulnerable be able to work remotely, or will they still be required to come to campus? And there's a related question, I think we can answer at the same time. Some faculty and staff may be primary caretakers of vulnerable individuals. What accommodation will the university provide for those people?
So, we are definitely want to enter into those conversations with immunocompromised and or persons who have to provide primary care for vulnerable populations. And as Anthony shared, every situation with every person who needs an accommodation is going to be unique. It's going to be a very specific conversation. So we're strongly encouraging anyone who falls into this category to come forward to HR. Hillary is the point of contact. Those persons should initiate that contact with Hillary, because it needs to be a HIPAA-protected conversation, and it needs to be confidential. So I encourage people to pursue that option.
I have a question here. It's really specific to faculty, in particular early stage faculty. What steps are being taken to mitigate the impact of these disruptions, including the removal of internal conference travel funding and research funding on pre-tenure faculty? So
we're trying to balance the public health reality with the financial reality. And this is forcing us to make some decisions as we strike that balance. But the first thing I would say is we gave every pre-tenure faculty member the option of taking a 1-year automatic extension on their tenure clock. I have had, I think, close to 15 pre-tenure faculty take advantage of that, and I expect to have more before September 1. But we thought that was a generous accommodation. It was, all you had to do was ask for it and you got it. And there really was no penalty. Any of those faculty can choose to come up a year early or 2 years early. So that was the first thing we did. The second thing we've done is we've agreed to look on an individual basis at any internal funding of pre-tenure faculty vis-a-vis either a startup package, seed funding, or any other kind of funding if we think that's essential for them to pursue their portfolio or dossier for their tenure. So, you know, we really do believe we're accommodating this concern.
Okay, more on an operational question, I suppose, is how is the university helping departments prepare for the possibility that faculty may get sick during the semester with COVID, I suppose, as opposed to?
So just as we always do. So I hope the faculty can appreciate that every year we have any number of faculty who fall ill and have to take FMLA, and you know their teaching schedules need to be accommodated. So this really needs to be handled at the local level by the departments in consultation with their department chair, their dean, and of course me if I need to get involved. But we do this all the time, and we'll continue to do this, you know, in the fall and on into the next academic year.
Okay, we have a question on, I guess, contact tracing. I know Katie Stets touched on this before. Maybe we can say a few more words. It says, can we outline how we'll handle contact tracing in the event of cases on campus?
Sure. As I said before, we'll work with the city and the state on specific things other than to try. I mean, immediately we try to identify where that person has been and what buildings they may have been in, where the exposure may have taken place, and then we will reach out appropriately to people. What we've done in the past is essentially send an email to people if we thought that it was likely that they had been in contact with somebody who had tested positive for the virus, and we would continue to do that again as things change in terms of guidance and expectations. We will modify that based on what the latest guidance is, but as we've been doing in the past, we'll continue to reach out to those Illinois Tech people. We can deal with. If there's someone outside of our community that needs to be notified, then we would work with city and state and the person infected to be able to do that.
Okay. Okay. So cleaning. All right. How will cleaning and disinfecting be handled in shared spaces such as classrooms and offices?
Okay, I just reactivated my mic, Nick. I'll take that one. So classrooms, as I had mentioned in the presentation, those will be cleaned daily by our custodial staff using disinfecting solutions, and we will have supplies in the classrooms for use by students and faculty on a more frequent basis if they wish to do so. Offices will be the same, although the frequency of custodial disinfecting won't be daily, but it will be consistent with state guidance, and we will have supplies there as well. Again, the emphasis is going to be for our custodial staff to be focusing on the high touch areas that don't have a single user, a lot of people flowing through them: restrooms, lobbies, entrances, elevators. So one thing I didn't mention about elevators is those buttons will be cleaned frequently. More than hourly, I would think. So that's all in development, the details, but that's the general concept. And we're using that disinfecting solution now. We have been ever since before the lockdown, actually.
Bruce, while you're on, I guess I have sort of two more questions I think you might be good to answer. And they're both on social distancing. It says, how is it possible to socially distance in elevators such as our high-rise residences, the tower, and the Convisor Law Center? And then the second part on social distancing is, will workspaces be spaced apart so that staff can socially distance while working?
Right, I'll take the elevators first. So again, we will be requiring masks in elevators. And the primary reason for masks to be required, even at the city and state level when that guidance was issued, is because they recognize that sometimes people won't be able to stay 6 feet apart. So that's where the mask provides additional protection and is a mitigating factor to the fact that you may not be exactly 6 feet apart. Also, there's a time element in the elevators. Those rides are not anywhere close to the 10 or 15 minutes that the CDC regards as more extended close contact, which increases the risk. And again, as I mentioned, we're providing UV air filters on the elevators to help just minimize the length of time that germs can live in that space. Regarding, I think the second question was on offices.
Yeah, socially distances in workspaces.
So one of the good things about being on a campus that was designed primarily in the 50s, 60s, and 70s is it was when offices had more space. So our offices are generally spaced farther apart than they would be had this campus all been designed since the year 2000. We do have several areas. I can think of maybe the admissions office as one example, where we recognize that they're probably tighter than the 6 foot separation. And we are going to take those on a case-by-case basis to see what we can do either to change the office configuration, to deal with some staggered schedules, or to even spread those offices out into some additional space. And then last but not least, use some barriers to make up for any space shortcomings that we might have. But in general, across campus, our seating is spread at a wider distance than what's required already in the social distancing conventions, just because it's an old campus.
One more social distancing question, I guess probably for Katie. How is social distancing being handled in our student population, and in particular in the dorms?
There are signs, and the staff is aware of what the expectations are. So we will follow the guidance that we've been provided, staying 6 feet apart when possible, wearing masks if not possible, and or if you choose to wear a mask in common areas, as well as asking people to wash their hands frequently, and we'll continue to have that message going throughout the year, throughout the time that we have students living on campus. We have provided extra cleaning supplies in places where we think they're needed, in kitchenettes, for example, where there's still a small population of students living, and so we continue to follow the trends and hold people accountable if they're not practicing proper social distancing.
Okay, a bunch of questions now, sort of on academics and classes. And the first question is, if there's a class in some room in one period, and then another class immediately in the next period after, will the classroom be cleaned in the 10-minute gap in between?
Let me answer that. So we are considering extending the passing period from 10 minutes to 20 minutes. We think this is very doable. We've modeled out all the classes that we think we would have to do this for. And we think doubling the passing time would be sufficient to try to mitigate the restricted traffic flow. I guess the other thing that we did that Bruce may have shared in his remarks was many of the academic buildings now have one-way travel in certain corridors and, you know, the reverse direction in the other corridor. So they're starting to get all the standards out for the traffic flow. And then finally, I've had a number of people ask questions about, will we provide the ability for students to wipe down their own seats and desks? And the answer is, this is exactly the solution we're considering. And this additional time in the passing period would enable that, we believe.
Okay, if a student does not or cannot return to campus and wants to take all their courses remotely, what is the process for them to ensure the courses they are registered for will be available remotely?
So as of this moment, all of our master's programs are being offered online in the fall. This is something that the deans and chairs all committed to. The second thing I would say is we know that of our entering first year class, we have 70 international students, 58 of whom do not yet have visas. So we are, Mike Gauze and his team are identifying who those 58 students are, what class, you know, what their intended major is, and what classes they could take online. So we're working diligently to try to provide online options for everyone who's not able to make it to campus. I would say that if they're concerned about attending classes, even if they do come to campus, that they should consult their advisor and undergraduate academic affairs to get an accommodation.
Yeah. Okay, so another classroom question, I think, given the current understanding of the governor's plan, should departments be limiting maximum enrollment to 49 students to keep under this 50 cap?
Yeah, so the vast majority of our class spaces are well below the 50-person cap. So, you know, this will be essential in many cases for live classes. And in fact, we think it'll be a requirement in phase 4. We're still awaiting final guidance from Illinois Board of Higher Education and the Illinois Department of Public Health. But we believe that there may be some discretion allowed to use pavilion spaces like the Hub Expo or Crown Hall, and that the restriction will not be placed on a pavilion building where basically in Crown Hall, it's one giant room. We believe that as long as there are plexiglass barriers up, that it will only be designated to the enclosed space within the barriers. So we think we'll be able to accommodate this.
Okay, and I guess the last of the submitted questions we're going to have before we open up to the floor. How should we think about whether classes should be online or live, given the limited availability of live classes, and also that some students, especially some master's students, who may be unable to come to campus?
Well, this is a great question, and it's my understanding, Nick, that you've been leading a group of faculty in a course addressing this exact issue. And, you know, so we've been soliciting input from every department and every faculty member in every department as to, you know, what is your preference? Can you deliver your class online and be as effective as you could in person? Do you have to deliver your class in person, or could you deliver your class in a hybrid mode? And with that information, we're putting our schedule together. The second thing I would say is first and second year students really want to be in the classroom. They really want to socialize. They really want to be with other students. And so we have a preference for trying to accommodate as many in-person classes for freshmen or first year students as we possibly can. And then the third thing I would say is we want to make sure every student has some in-person classes. I mean, if I were a student and I was going off to college and all of my classes were online, I'd question, well, why even go? And we know from informal surveys that students are very, very concerned about going off to college and having the whole experience be online. And in fact, the Chronicle of Higher Education released a study today on 1,000 colleges that have described their reopening plans, and only 8% of them, only 8% of those colleges are saying all of our classes are going to be online. So, I think, this is a real balancing act that we're trying to play. We want to keep our community safe, but we also want to create an experience for our students where they'll want to come back the next year. And so the short answer to the question is, I think it depends on who the student is, and it depends on the faculty member in the class that they're teaching, and we're trying to do that giant optimization problem right now.
Yeah, I'm going to comment on that because you alluded to the faculty group that we got together. We have representatives from each department, usually the UGSC rep or someone else picked by their chair or something. And we've been meeting with them, and they've been talking to their departments. Chairs and deans have been involved. A lot of people have been involved in this, and it's still up in the air. There's been an enormous effort from the registrar. I can't tell you any other organizations where we've had 2 a.m. Google Meet calls with several people working on the problem in the middle of the night. So it's crazy. Abby McGrath has a hand. Are you interested? I'm not sure. Abby, raise your hand again if you want to say something. I'm not quite sure if you're looking to pipe in here. Okay. Well, Abby's on the call. She's been involved, and I will. Okay, so I'm opening it. That's our last question. I'm opening it to questions from the floor now, and to manage this, because we have we reached 310 people at one point. We are still close to 300 on the call. If you have a question, raise your hand, and then you'll be promoted to ask your question. Do you have any questions from the floor?
Adjunct cuts be made.
And we'll adjunct cuts.
I answered this question in the chat earlier. The savings that we have to realize, as I mentioned in my comments on the financial considerations, are 40%. So I'm giving the department chairs and the deans discretion as to how they arrive at those 40% cuts. So for example, in one department, the adjuncts may be super essential, and the dean and the department chair may say, we're going to take our cuts in operating, we're going to take them in student workers, we're going to take them in other areas. Another unit may be able to make 50% cuts in adjuncts and do it now. So we're really allowing those units to have that discretion met.
Okay. Any other questions? No questions. All right. It just takes me a minute to, I'm trying to get there. It takes a second, it seems, when you raise your hand to propagate. No? Yeah, it just takes, I know, it takes a minute. Go ahead, Peter.
Joel Goldhar says, who will teach the adjuncts courses? Joel, you may know that we had no sabbaticals this year, and I've asked all the department chairs and deans to press all of their full-time faculty into full service. And so the expectation is the few adjuncts that we're going to have to get rid of, their teaching load will be made up by full-time faculty. Sumant asked, will there be cuts in TA budgets? We do have guidelines on to whom we will provide TAs. Wherever we really feel we need TAs, we'll have them. Lisa Montgomery asked, will there be instructions online and on campus for visitors? We will have no external visitors to campus. We're really trying to hunker down and have no travel and no external visitors to campus, at least in the fall of 2020. Any plans for Keating Center to reopen? That's a good question. We may have to use Keating as a classroom, And athletics is developing its own reopening plan following all the guidelines that have been provided by the city, the state, and CDC. Elizabeth asks, why hasn't staff advisory council been included in drafting an action plan? Actually, staff advisory council was involved. He was on the reopening committee, so were many others. Does no external, Kemi asked, does no external visitors include those who come to IIT to conduct unpaid, which is J1 scholars? It's my understanding the State Department, there was just an executive order issued that says there will be no more J1 visas. Sabani Dada Baria says, what has the social distancing compliance among students been so far? Well, as Katie said, Sabani, we had 700 people on campus in the peak of the pandemic, and there was no apparent outbreak of the virus on campus. So I would argue that social distancing compliance was either very good or the few cases we had were asymptomatic. But we were unable to discern any community member to community member transmission. You asked another question. What will be done to create a cultural norm for students to do social distance beyond the classroom? You know, I think we're all in this together. I think we all need to reinforce that culture and get them to adopt that. What about the external tenants in the tower? That's not really part of the public. I mean, if they're tenants, then you know, we will interact with them to ensure that they're doing everything that we're doing. We got so many questions here. Let's see. Carol asked, what about, yeah, okay. Any plans for in-person exams? Nick, do you want to answer that?
Oh, yeah, there's a big plan for in-person exams. There will be an in-person bookable exam facility like the final exam facility in the hub, maybe not in the hub, but in the classrooms. That'll be communicated to that faculty working group. We've been discussing it in there, and we're having a meeting again this Friday. So that will be available.
Nazreen Khalili asks if a faculty has, I believe, heart problems and needs to teach online, should this faculty also go to HR? Anyone who feels like they need an accommodation, you know, a medical accommodation should go to HR. Boris asks, how about externally funded research travel? I am allowing research travel that's completely funded on external research dollars. Will you be allowed back on campus? If you're asymptomatic, yes. You know, I would strongly encourage you, if you have to travel, wherever you're going, you know, practice all the guidelines, just like we're going to do on campus. Elizabeth asks, Tracy Allen question, will the stairwells be consistently cleaned as well as railings, etc.? Bruce, would you like to answer that?
Sure, yes. Stairwells, with those that are more trafficked, getting more attention, they will be attended to by our custodial staff with disinfecting solution. I see the question about cleaning wipes. So when it comes to cleaning materials, cleaning wipes are probably the item that is in the shortest supply nationally. So to the extent we can provide those, we will, but they also tend to disappear quickly. So we may also provide spray bottles and paper towels with disinfecting solution in the spray bottles to achieve the same effect.
Great, thank you, Bruce. Ian asked the same question that I think Boris did. Gabriel asked, students scatter for Thanksgiving break. Any talk about having students stay home? If we need to, a lot of our students are from the Chicago area and they really don't go anywhere for Thanksgiving. Greg Chasson asked, is the elimination of course reductions for administrative positions a blanket policy? No, it's not. It's at the discretion of the chair and the dean. And I've spoken with most of them about that. Ron Henderson, yeah, it's very unfortunate about the visas. Write your congressman. Andy Howard, one of our adjuncts passed on an interesting article on compliance among students. Andy, I'll check that out. Thank you for sharing. Roya asked last year using the online safe test for exams not work for Mac. Was that corrected? Again, Roya, this is something that we're looking into closely. We're looking at multiple options for online safe exams. Nick, do you want to comment on that again?
Yeah, I think the online exams are challenging. They work in some contexts. I know a number of faculty are big proponents of them. I equally know that many faculty and indeed many students are really not in favor of them. There's some students that feel they're invasive and that they just don't work. Some students have also expressed concerns about academic honesty, just as faculty have, and students sometimes are even more concerned about academic honesty in many cases than faculty are. So there's a number of platforms available. Lauren Woods and Kelly Rourke over in Office of Digital Learning, or Center for Learning Innovation, or whatever we're calling them now, have provided a number of excellent workshops, and faculty that are interested in examining those, I think it's a really great option. But we're also going to have, as I said, some in-person socially distant exam spaces that are going to be really available to faculty that find those crucial. Okay. Yeah, Kelly just posted a link to some of their workshops, Kelly Rourke. It's a really an excellent,
Nick, maybe I could make a comment about all the questions that were submitted. As Alan said at the beginning of our town hall, we had, I think we had close to 150 questions submitted. We had a whole bunch. I have gone through and composed draft answers to about a third of them. Bruce answered a bunch. Nick answered several. Anthony helped us with some. We're working very hard on getting really clear, concise answers to all of your questions. And we'll be posting all of those on the website as soon as we can get them up. Ava asks, as much instruction may be delivered online, has the university considered requiring incoming freshmen to have a laptop? Ava, you know, most first-year students do have a laptop, and the ones that don't, we're prepared to make some accommodation for them if they need it. So we're going to a greatly increased virtual computing lab next year. That's, in fact, we just approved the order, the payment for that today. We're going to be putting in a lot more computing labs. And we do have loaner laptops. So we're going to try to accommodate every student who needs a computing solution.
Yeah, let me add one more comment on that. I think it goes beyond just a computer in many cases. Certain departments have specialized, maybe drawing tablets and maybe communication bandwidth requirements and webcam requirements. And we're going to try and develop a sort of a recommended technology package for students to communicate this. Sometimes these expenditures are relatively modest too, in terms of a decent webcam as opposed to just your cell phone or something like that can really improve the quality of remote education.
I had two more questions that I'm answering online. Was asked about connectivity. Ophir tells me that we have all the connectivity we need. We just need to turn it on when we need it. Alice says, will students be required to wear a mask in classrooms? Yes. And I'm counting on peer pressure and the instructor to make sure they do wear their masks. Let's see. Elizabeth asks, how often will the elevator floor buttons be cleaned? Will the monitors do this after each ride? You know, it's an interesting question. I use a handkerchief to push the elevator buttons whenever I get on an elevator now. Also, I think the consensus is coming out. I just read an article about this in the Wall Street Journal that it's believed that it's very difficult to transmit the virus through a surface if you're not exposed to the surface for a long period of time and the surface has a lot of viral loading on it. So the primary mode of transmission is through people interacting closely through the breath aerosols, etc. That's the primary mode. So one of the things I would say is whenever you get on an elevator, wherever you end up going, wash your hands. Wash your hands, wash your face, but also carry something on yourself so you can push the button without using your hand. Phil asks, how will disinfecting of reusable masks be handled? I wear a cloth mask, Phil, and I throw it in my washing machine when I get home. You know, I mean, I suppose if you have an N95 mask, you might say, hey, can we ozonolate that or whatever? We're not going to do that. I mean, it would just be unwieldy for the whole campus community.
Yeah. There's one question I see on there about F1 visas, and I know the international office can supply formal guidance, but I know there's been a lot of accommodation, and we expect that's a State Department thing. But they have made accommodations and will probably continue to do so.
And we've heard mixed things about the opening of visas. I mean, the opening of consulates for F1 visas. You know, Shanghai opened last week. Beijing was first open, but it closed because of the resurgence. Now it's supposed to open in mid-July. India is trying to open. I just got something from Sri Kumar in India that he thinks Indian prospective students may be able to schedule visa interviews here in the near term. But this is such a fluid situation that it's really difficult to judge at this point.
There's one question about this legal obligation. I think that maybe you want to, I think that some perspective on that, Peter. That you see that question on the chat? Are you confirming that the university is legally obligated to not tap its endowment?
So, you know, if in fact the university revenues were permanently impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, I mean, we would have to weigh, I think, other options to balance our budget. So one option would be another restructuring of the university. I think we would all prefer not to do that. You know, our goal is to really optimize revenue for the coming fiscal year. Our goal is to do these belt-tightening measurements in order to get us through this year, and then work like crazy to recruit another class in the next year. The good news is that we've had surprisingly strong demand at the undergraduate level. The other good news is that we've had a greater than normal interest from domestic students in our graduate programs this year. So that's actually good news. But to answer your question, John, if we had continued fiscal weakness and you know, it was clear that the structure of the university just couldn't be accommodated by our revenue, we would have to restructure the university. I think that would be the only option available to us. Now, we are not legally prevented from tapping into our endowment or other forms of emergency funding, but that's not part of our operating budget. You know, and I think that's another last resort because we need that endowment. We're going to need it going forward. We have many gifts in the endowment that have restrictions on them, and we have commitments to those donors to spend those dollars on those commitments.
Let me say something here, and I don't really know, and I'm going to go on a limb in talking where perhaps Mike Horan should see this, but my understanding is that we could tap it, but that would trigger increases in our debt load, in our debt payments, because we would no longer be eligible for these very favorable interest rates, right? So we're not legally, my understanding, prevented from doing that. It would just increase our costs further, right? Like borrowing on the credit card. Go ahead, Mike.
To tap the endowment. So we're talking about restricted monies for the most part. So these are all restricted, the donors' restrictions to them. So most of our endowment is that. Now we have the $80 million I was talking about that we finished the year with. That is board designated dollars. They're still designated to something like the renovation of Cunningham. That's designated money that came in, but the board could change the designation of them. But you know, it's a little bit like if we were to tap our endowment in order to get through this crisis, it's a little bit like when things happen bad in your life and you tap your retirement. I mean, our endowment is what's going to keep us going for a long time, and you know that's why we take a 5% draw. We should be taking a 4.5% draw, but it's just not the way. It's not going to be operational problems. And this potentially could be a 2-year deal. It's dealing with grad students. By the time we get through it, it's going to have a little bit of a hangover into even next year. So we have to fix it on an operational side and leave the strength of our balance sheet there just in case something happens and we need to tap it. It's there. It's our insurance policy, but it's not a good decision to do it just as part of an operational basis.
All right. Anything else? We're still getting.
Again, we will follow up on everyone's question either in the FAQs or with a personal note if you submitted them in the chat room. I've tried to answer as many of them as I could, during the course of the town. I'm really grateful for all your questions. I mean, there's lots of great questions here. I hope we've been as responsive as we could possibly be at this time.
Okay, I think I want to emphasize that we have this faculty classes reopening group going with somebody from every department, and it's sort of every 2 weeks we're meeting now on Fridays. Faculty can really reach out to whoever this is in their department or their UFC reps and find out who that is if they have additional concerns, in particular faculty concerns about classes and operations like that. I also know that Bruce has a point person on various topics that was listed on those slides. Perhaps we could get those point persons on various topics disseminated so people would know who to talk to for any specific concerns on various aspects. Because there's working groups on each of these top things, and they're working very hard. Okay.
We're at about time, Nick.
Yeah, I think we're running down. I think we're looking pretty good. There's not really more questions left. I think I want to thank you guys, Peter, Alan, Bruce, and Mike Moran, and Katie, and all the senior administration for talking to the faculty today on behalf of the faculty. There's a lot of good information here. And
hey, Nick, if it's okay, can I just say one more thing we didn't really talk about before everybody gets on? A couple things we didn't talk about that are positives for us this year is that, Sprint and T-Mobile merged. We still have one EBS channel now that the FCC will allow us to sell. Last EBS channel we sold for $65 million. We will work towards a sale this year of that EBS channel. The second thing we're working on, Bruce and I are working on, is actually selling or putting our cogeneration plant, which we really kind of don't use right now, into a P3 arrangement, which is where we bring outside investors in. They will upgrade our cogeneration plant so that we will generate all of our utilities from that plant. In exchange for us then buying our utilities from that P3 agreement, we will probably receive somewhere between we think $20 to $40 million in cash for the sale of that. It's a 40-year deal, but we believe that we will get that deal done by December. So, a couple other things that's just going to make us our balance sheet even more stronger by the end of this year.
I want to end my remarks by just thanking Nick for organizing and moderating the town hall. Nick has really provided very strong leadership over the last many months, and I'm just really grateful to him.
Yeah, and I'd just like to say at the end here that, you know, this really is something that no one expected. And this really is a time that we didn't ever foresee. But we've taken the viewpoint that we're going to work through this together. All of us who are full-time here have a responsibility to make sure the university is successful going forward. And I'm sure that a year from now, we'll be in a different situation and back on our path of moving forward. So I'd like to thank everyone for understanding where we are at this time, and really appreciate everything that faculty and staff have done ever since the pandemic started to make sure that we continued with our academic mission. Thank you.
All right, thank you all. Thanks to all of us, and let's hope we're in better shape after this event than we were before it, which I think we'll come out on the other side a successful university. Okay.